lately, we've heard a lot about the crushing burden of student loans. Right now, tens of millions of Americans owe $1.5 trillion in student debt, an incredibly high figure, up 50% from just a few years ago. I don't know if it's a good idea for the government to just cancel all that debt, like some Democrats have proposed, but I get where they're coming from. It's not just that it really stinks to graduate from college or grad school and then immediately realize that it might take decades to pay back these loans. In study after study, kids who graduate with no debt end up being worth a lot more money than their classmates who have outstanding student loan balances. Although, as I said before, student debt is a heck of a lot cheaper than credit card debt. So don't sweat the program too much. The problem here is simply that there's so darn much of it, and you can't get rid of it even in bankruptcy. Now, I'm a big believer in social mobility, which is why I'm constantly coming out here and teaching you how to use the stock market, the greatest engine of wealth ever created, to help you make some serious money. So for any of you who are parents or are thinking of becoming parents, let me just tell you right now that there are very few things you can do for your kids' future that are better than paying for as much of their college education as you can afford. We know that college graduates have a much easier time getting good jobs. We also know that they ultimately make more money than non-graduates. It's just a fact of life. Of course, if I were kind of making a kind of Abe Maslow style hierarchy of financial needs, and that's MASLOW for those who want to Google it, I'd tell you that it's more important for you to save and invest for retirement, which is why I talked about that earlier in the show. For those of you who are parents, maybe you're wondering how you could possibly prioritize your own retirement over making sure your kids have the best possible future. Simple, because believe me, if you reach retirement age and you don't have enough money to pay for your needs, who do you think is going to support you? Your kids. You don't want to be a burden on them, so take care of yourselves first. All the books say it. I've studied it. I've thought about it. I agree. However, after you've saved enough for retirement in a given year, then it's time to start thinking about college, even if your kid is only a toddler. And the best way to save for college, hands down, is through what's known as a 529 plan. Now, these plans vary by state, but the general rules apply all across the country. There are two kinds of 529 plans. First, some states let you use a 529 as a way to hedge against tuition inflation. You can buy college tuition credits at today's prices and then use them in the future. Now, that's not what I'm talking about, although especially not in a world where major national politicians are talking about making tuition free at public universities. Now, I want you to use a 529 savings plan. Again, these are run by the states, but generally speaking, a 529 doesn't let you manage your own portfolio. You have to pick between a mix of different mutual funds, just like many 401k plans. Now, that's not my favorite way to do things. I prefer you to have control of your assets. But 529s have so much going for them, I'm willing to swallow this one flaw. Remember, when you can only choose between funds, go for a low-cost fund that mirrors the market, like an S&P 500 index fund. So what are the rules for a 529 plan? Let's say you just had your first child. Congratulations. If you can afford it, you should start a 529 with your kid as the beneficiary right then and there. Well, maybe wait a couple of days. After all, you just had a baby. Although, as anyone who's read Confessions of a Street Addict knows, I traded big blocks of Alcoa throughout the birthing. Admittedly, not my finest hour, somewhat ill-advised, although the trades only worked out financially, if not familiarly. Here's how a 529 works. The contributions are not tax deductible, so you're paying for this with after-tax income. But, and here's the good part, once your money is in the 529 plan, you don't pay any taxes on your gains, so they can compound tax-free year after year. Really, it's a lot like a Roth IRA, except for college rather than retirement. Because of federal gift tax laws, you can contribute $15,000 a year if you're single, $30,000 if you're married, and you file your taxes jointly. That's a heck of a lot of money. Oh, and by the way, your children's grandparents can contribute to the same 529 plan, too. And if you don't have the money, a grandparent can also start a 529 with your kid as a beneficiary, although for financial aid reasons, it's better to have a parent do it. Now, let's say for some reason you or your parents are sitting on a really huge sum of money. One of the cool things about a 529 plan is that you can front load 5 years' worth of contributions without incurring the federal gift tax, as long as you don't write any checks to the plan's beneficiary over the next 5 years. In other words, a single parent or grandparent could potentially invest $75,000 into a 529 right from the start. Or if you're married and filing jointly, you can contribute $150,000. For the next 5 years after that, you won't be able to contribute anything without getting hit by that gift tax, which is something you don't want. But honestly, once you've dropped that kind of money into 529, you won't need to make too many more contributions. The key here, though, is that you want to get that money into your kid's 529 as early as possible. That's because the greatness of these plans is all about the power of compounding. Given that you don't pay taxes within the 529, if you can somehow contrive to contribute $75,000 right off the bat, and you invest that money in a low-cost index fund that I'm advising that mirrors the market, the rule of thumb is that over time, you'll make an average of roughly 7% per year. I know the stock market is a lot more volatile than that, but just as a thought experiment, if stocks generally perform like they have historically, you could double your investment in about 9 years. So if you start savings right now when your kid is born, by the time he or she is 18, the value of your 529 plan will have doubled and doubled again. If you started with $75,000, then after 18 years, borrowing some kind of catastrophe, you could have as much as $300,000. That's enough for a fancy, expensive private college education and a decent chunk of law school to boot, although if they don't hold back the price of tuition, it won't even cover the 4 years. But you got to start somewhere. I know that most people can't front load a 529 like this, especially not with all the expense that comes with raising a child. But it's worth keeping in mind that front loading as much as possible is indeed the best strategy. Oh, and for grandparents, this may sound kind of grim, but your 529 plan contributions won't count towards your estate tax. Hey, to borrow a line from The Life of Brian, always look on the bright side of death. Last thing about saving for college and grad school, any money in a 529 plan that you don't use, you can transfer to another relative. We're talking siblings, parents, even first cousins. Oh, and if you save all this money and your ungrateful kid decides not to go to college, you can just withdraw the money from the 529 plan. But in that case, you'll have to pay taxes on any of your gains along with a 10% penalty. So here's the bottom line. No, paying for your kid's college education isn't as important, at least financially, as providing for yourself in retirement. But if you have children, then after you've made enough money, enough retirement contributions for the year, if you've made those contributions, putting money in a 529 college savings plan should be the next item on your agenda. It's the best way to protect your kids from the crushing burden of student loan debt. Stay with Cramer.
Don't miss a second of Mad Money. Follow @JimCramer on Twitter. Have a question? Tweet Cramer. #MadTweets. Send Jim an email to madmoney@cnbc.com or give us a call at 1-800-743-CNBC. Miss something? Head to madmoney.cnbc.com.